Hey everybody, I just decided I'm just going to go read all of chapter 2, and then I'm just going to go through Howard Zinn's chapters 1, 3, 4, 5, and so on until we're done, because there's not that much in chapter 2, and I honestly want to get my thoughts out on this book, so here we go. We return to our discussion of the people that comprise what is now known as Sierra Leone. One slave trader, John Newton, who later became an anti-slavery leader, wrote about the people of what is now Sierra Leone. The state of slavery among these wild, barbarous people, as we esteem them, is much milder than in our colonies, for as on the one hand, they have no land in high cultivation like our West Indian plantations, and therefore no call for that excessive, unintermitted labor which exhausts our slaves, so on the other hand, no man is permitted to draw blood even from a slave. African slavery is hardly to be praised, but it is far different from plantation or mining slavery in the Americas, which was lifelong, normally crippling, destructive to family ties, without hope of any future. African slavery lacked two elements that make slavery in America the most cruel form of slavery in history: the frenzy for limitless profit that comes from capitalistic agriculture, the reduction of the slave to less than human status by the use of racial hatred, with that relentless clarity based on color, where white was master, black was slave. In fact, it was because they came from a settled culture of tribal customs and family ties, of communal life and traditional ritual, that African blacks found themselves especially helpless when removed from this. They were captured in the interior, frequently by blacks caught up in the slave trade themselves, sold on the coast, then shoved into pens with blacks of other tribes, often speaking different languages. So again, this is a complex issue. Some Africans obviously didn't want to be slaves themselves, and so some would sell their neighbors or their enemies or political distance, things like that, and escape that fate, the same fate. And that happened from time to time as well. The conditions of capture and sale were crushing affirmations to the black African of his helplessness in the face of superior force. The marches to the coast, sometimes for 1,000 miles, with people shackled around the neck, under whip and gun, were death marches in which 2 of every 5 blacks died. On the coast, they were kept in chains until they were picked and sold. One John Barbeau, at the end of the 17th century, described these cages on the Gold Coast. As the slaves come down to Fida from the inland country, they were put in a booth for prison near the beach, and when the Europeans were to receive them, they are brought out onto a large plain, where the ship's surgeons examine every part of every one of them, to the smallest member, men and women being stark naked. Such as are allowed good and sound are set on one side, marked on the breast with a red-hot iron, imprinting the mark of the French, English, or Dutch companies. The branded slaves, after this, are returned to their former booths, where they await shipment, sometimes 10 to 15 days. Then they were packed aboard the slave ships in spaces not bigger than coffins, chained together in the dark, wet slime of the ship's bottom, choking in the stench of their own excrement. Documents of this time describe the conditions. The height, sometimes between decks, was only 18 inches, so that the unfortunate human beings could not turn around, or even on their sides, the elevation being less than the height of their shoulders, and here they were usually chained to the decks by the neck and legs. In such a place, the sense of misery and suffocation is so great that the Negroes are driven to frenzy.